It was late summer, and I was sitting on the porch, my hands and lap sticky with my very first wedge of watermelon about as long as my arm. I was surrounded on all sides by whining insects, and the evening heat curled around my legs like a family cat. My father, bigger than the world, sat beside me with his very own watermelon wedge. He took a bite, spat out a seed, and turned to me. "It's good, right?" How do I capture in words the honeysuckle safety of sitting beside him? "Yeah," I creak with the crickets, and watch the night sky carry the sleepy sun in its arms off to bed beyond the horizon. Welcome to Games in the Glade, a stress-free, occasional gaming news and reviews podcast. I'm your host, Tina, and I'll be guiding you through some of the most recent news in the gaming world, as well as telling you about a game I think you'll enjoy. This episode, I'll cover the late summer game announcements, the Mother Direct fan showcase, the Sonic Amateur Game Expo, and some Nintendo news. Then I'll get to your responses to last episode's question about what was the most fun you've had playing a game with somebody else. And last, I'll give you my review of Witchy Life's story and finish up by asking you, what's the oldest game that you love? First up, some summer game announcements. Little Nightmares 3 was announced this summer, featuring what looks like co-op gameplay. In the trailer, two children, one in a cape and a birdbeak mask, and the other in a goggled helmet, with two tufts of hair sticking out, traverse the land of nowhere, hiding from gargantuan baby dolls, floating on a breeze with parasols in hand, and solving cheeky puzzles together. The game is obviously the third in the Little Nightmares franchise, with the first game featuring the yellow rain-coated protagonist navigating a ship full of sinners, and the second following a child in a paper bag hat helping a fellow lost child in a familiar yellow raincoat through a city of twisted adults. Will these kids be featured in Little Nightmares 3? Possibly? I don't know. I've played both games so far, and I'm not entirely sure on their timeline. So the games feel very recursive. I'm guessing this third entry will fall into the very messy pre-para post-quel territory that will continue to surprise and delight the fans. The game is slated to release in 2024 for the PS5 and PS4, the Nintendo Switch, Xbox Series X and S, and Xbox One. If you would like to watch the trailer for yourself, I have included a link in the description of this episode as always. Devolver Digital has always been a little bit cheeky, which makes their Devolver Delayed showcase, in which they announced that several games slated for release this year will be moving to next year, more of a delight than a downer. On the list of titles that won't be coming out when they're expected are The Plucky Squire, which is probably my most anticipated Devolver release, which shifts between 2D picture book and 3D world exploration. It's now slated for 2024, though it can be wishlisted right now, so you'll know exactly when it releases. Stick It to the Stickman, a roguelike stickman brawler set in the chaotic workplace, is also moving to 2024. Skate Story by Sam Ang, wherein you play as a skater made of glass, trying to execute intense tricks. Angerfoot, also the first-person kicker and shooter, and Pepper Grinder, a drilling-based platformer, are also moving to 2024. Now, Devolver also announced that some games won't be delayed, like Gunbrella, Wizard with a Gun, the Talos Principle 2, Karma Zoo, Broforce Forever DLC, and the McPixel 3 DLC, as well as the Cosmic Will Sisterhood, are all on track to release when anticipated. And that's everything covered in the delayed showcase. Literally everything. You don't have to watch the original video unless you want to hear the funny and charming announcers say everything I've said except funnier and more charming. So if you'd like to do that, you can watch the Devolver Delayed showcase by following the link in the description of this episode. Red Dead Redemption, the rowdy Western game by Rockstar, is not getting remade, but has been ported to the Switch and PS4 in August of this year, so that modern gamers can experience the story of John Marston as he hunts down his former gang members. The game includes the Undead Nightmare DLC as well, which puts a zombie spin to the spurs of Marston's tale, though the game will not feature any of the multiplayer content from either the base game or its DLC. There was quite a kerfuffle when the game was announced to be a port rather than a remake, but at least now you can play Red Dead Redemption on something that isn't your old Xbox 360 or PS3. I'll link to Rockstar's announcement in the description of this episode. It was just the 10th anniversary of Papers, Please on August the 8th, and to celebrate, Lucas Pope, the developer, created a demake of the game, remixing the iconic passport rejection and acceptance elements into a new but retro form, the LCD game. If you don't know, LCD handhelds were all the rage in the 80s and early 90s, before the advent of Nintendo's Game Boy. These handhelds played just one game, and rather than having pixels move across the screen, the games were constructed through layers of images that alternated on and off to convey the motion of the game. I had a few of these growing up, but the most memorable to me was the Monopoly LCD handheld, which played crunchy sound effects of the Monopoly man saying stuff like, "Would you like to buy this property?" or "Go directly to jail." We also had a super involved LCD game called Afterburner, which I still have. It has a joystick to control the motion, a functional trigger which launches missiles, and a tiny LCD screen to watch the aerial action. Pope also has a fondness for LCD games, and fondly recalled Plane and Tank by Radio Shack and Rambo by Acclaim in his development log of the Papers, Please LCD demake. I found Pope's process fascinating. He talked about the reason why LCD games would be the inspiration for this iteration of Papers, Please. Primarily, their limitations. There's no pixels, no overlapping or touching graphics, a few frames per second, and no advanced logic. Shift registers only. The segmentation and background art of LCD games were the spark that pushed him to emulate that format, and the low action elements of Papers, Please, along with the challenge of interpreting the original game's randomly generated character faces, would be the larger focus of his creative efforts. Another challenge for Pope was translating the original game's gameplay to a more basic series of actions. That meant eliminating major story elements, trimming the document inspection down to just the passports of the characters, cutting dialogue, and removing repeat characters. Goodbye, Georgie. What the handheld LCDS game could do was have a person appear, show their stated name and country of origin, give the player a moment to verify that the details matched, and then stamp approve or deny. Just the right amount of gameplay for a handheld device inspired by those of Pope's early days, which he said that despite being mostly terrible, were at least terrible but in your pocket, which is the core of their charm. My biggest takeaway from Pope's devlog was his sustained love of games and game development, as well as his desire to share that passion with others, be they folks reading the log and learning what went into game design, or his wife, who he brought back into the world of game design by working on Papers, Please LCD together. The log was very inspiring, so I would recommend reading it if you're interested in retro hardware, game development, Papers, Please itself, or if you're just having one of those moments where you need a little nostalgia blast. Pope is also working on Mars After Midnight, a lighthearted game with more procedurally generated faces for the play date, which is a charming indie handheld played with a crank. If you'd like to read the devlog or play Papers, Please the LCD game, I've linked both in the description of this episode. Earthbound was one of the first games I played as a kid, and one I return to often when I'm craving some nostalgia. And it's also one of the most influential RPGs out there. It was inspired by Dragon Quest, but it ended up exploding outside of that genre to create a genre of its own, Mother Likes. The Mother Direct is a celebration of games in development that carry the torch that Mother and Earthbound lit in our hearts long ago, and this year's Direct put the spotlight on a few mods and Mother-inspired games that I'd like to share with you all. Here are the ones that caught my eye. First up, the mods, like Earthbound Beginnings, a mod of Earthbound that recreates its predecessor, Mother, in Earthbound. Having not played Mother myself, I can't quite tell if this is a one-to-one recreation of Mother in Earthbound's coding, but the characters strongly resemble the cast of the original game. There's also Earthbound Dimensions, a 3D remake of Earthbound that I've watched the development of on Twitter for about a year or so. It'll have a functional demo of the early Onett stage, which is the first level of Earthbound, in late 2023. And last but not least in terms of mods, there's Mother 2 Deluxe, which animates the battle sprites of Earthbound's turn-based combat. It also allows different difficulty selections, like Original, Casual, Deluxe, and Insane, and players who select harder difficulties are rewarded with new areas, enemies, and bosses inspired by the Mother novel by Kumi Sayori. There were a good handful of Mother-likes featured in the Mother Direct, but the one that caught my eye the most was Athenian Rhapsody, a Mother-like with tons of optional party members, unique battle modes, and boasting of a story that had so many branching paths, that they swore no two players would have the same experience. The editing on this trailer was a little too memey for my own tastes, but I trust that Undertale fans will very much enjoy it. If you're a diehard Mother fan, you should check out the Direct. I will link it in the description of this episode. I never really played Sonic games growing up because it was too fast for my little baby eyes and my little baby brain, but my older brother did, and through it he found a wonderful world of cool hedgehogs and even cooler OCs. Sonic fandom is amazing. Modders and folks inspired by the fast-paced gameplay have all come together year after year to create a show displaying their work in what's called the Sonic Amateur Games Expo. I watched this year's Expo with my brother, and here are our highlights. I'm going to cover these in rapid fire succession, so I hope you can keep up. First up, there's Cosmo Volpes, which is about a cool fox dude who gathers treasure while doing that cool Sonic pose. Then there's Big Boy Boxing, a punch-out like with tons of personality and hopefully less stereotypes about people of other nationalities, and Code Bunny, a platformer in the style of Mega Man, with Devil May Cry style combo building and cute bunny girls. There's also Cosmo Jellica, a highly polished shoot-'em-up starring a furry. Frog Gun Encore, a 3D platformer with a grappling gun, the sequel to Frog Gun, obviously, and Dono's Tale, a cute 2D platformer starring an adorable dinosaur. There's also Dormaveglia, a Castlevania-like starring a spunky kid with a whip in a colorful world, Honey Bunny, a bunny girl in the 80s anime sense who's platforming and just being cute in a costume one might find in a video game casino, and Legend Maker, create your own Legend of Zelda dungeons and share them with friends. And in terms of original games, there's also Tori Saturn. The Tori franchise explores games in various retro styles. This Tori game emulates the aesthetic and gameplay of classic Sega Saturn titles. This one's a favorite of one of my brother's favorite YouTubers, Ant Dude. There's also Kobold's Tale, be a scheming kobold and steal the loot in a very cute 3D stealth game. And finally, Kura 5, Bonds of the Undying, a very well-made Boktai clone. You might remember Boktai is the Hideo Kojima game that had a solar panel on the back of the cartridge to charge your in-game weapon with actual sunlight to kill vampires in-game with sunlight. Bub's Big Blowout is one of the fan games in the Expo that really got my attention, as I used to play Puzzle Bobble all the time with my brother as a kid. And in this fan game, you bubble up enemies for points. And another fan game that got my attention is the Untitled Paper Mario fan game, which seems to be in the infancy of its development, but I'm a fan of classic Paper Mario, so I'm interested. The entire expo for this year is about 30 minutes long, and each game gets about 10 seconds to shine. But really, these games are made by Sonic fans, so you gotta go fast. If you want to watch the whole production, I'll link it in the description of this episode. And also, if you want synopses, screenshots, and download links for all the games, those are featured on the Sage website, which I'll also link in the description. We got more news about Super Mario Bros. Wonder in August in a direct presentation from Nintendo. In the direct, details on the mechanics at play in the platform were covered, including some information on co-op and online play. For instance, when you're defeated in local co-op, your character floats around the course as a ghost until another living player touches them. When you play online, you can see the shadows of other players in the world or on other courses playing alongside you in real time. If you die on a level online, bumping into another player's shadow can bring you back to life. You can also share items and greetings with other players online, and place a standee in courses to revive other players who might be stuck in a tough spot. You can create a room to play with your friends online, and race against each other to see who completes a course, beats a boss, or grabs a Wonder Seed first. The Direct also covered new powers like Elephant Form, which allows you to whip enemies with your nose and crush them with your might. Bubble Form lets you blow bubbles to catch enemies and also get to hard-to-reach places. And Drill Form lets you take out heavily dependent enemies or burrow into the floor ceiling to navigate the level. I was intrigued to find out from the extended gameplay showcase that in certain areas of the Flower Kingdom, you can freely roam the map and select courses in whatever order that you'd like to play them in, just in case one course is too challenging to take on. I think that's one step towards making the game more approachable to new players and young folks. In a similar vein, you can also use characters like Yoshi or Nabbit to play the game without taking any damage. Lastly, the Direct covered badges, which give you abilities that change your gameplay, like giving you a parachute hat to slow down your fall, or the ability to wall jump, or even helping you swim faster underwater with the dolphin kick. You can also grapple with vines, sense items in a stage, draw coins to you, and more with badges. If you'd like to watch the Direct to learn more about the characters and abilities in Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I'll link the direct in the description of this episode. And last, in terms of Nintendo news, Nintendo announced via their social media that Charles Martinet would be retiring as the voice of Mario, moving on to his new role as Mario Ambassador. Martinet has voiced the legendary plumber since the Super Mario 64 days, providing us with many wonderful whoops, wahoos, and wahas over the years. His new role as ambassador will have him traveling the world, sharing the joy of Mario and interacting with fans, according to Nintendo. I first wondered about Martinet's role in the Mario franchise when I heard the voice of Mario in the new debut teaser for Super Mario Bros. Wonder just a little while back. There was something to Mario's wowie zowie that sounded unique and different. I am happy to hear that Martinet will continue to work with Nintendo in the future, and I'm also happy to hear that Mario's new voice actor, whoever that may be, is filling the role with a lot of zest and personality. If you'd like to read the full release, I'll have it linked in the description of this episode. Last episode, I asked you all about your favorite experiences sharing a game with someone else. Here are your responses. Starting off, Netty42 on YouTube said, I want a Kirby Air Ride remaster or sequel solely due to the memories I have of playing the game with my best friend as a kid. I also have to shout out all the times my siblings and I would play Mario Kart 8 and 8 Deluxe during breaks when I was in college. Thanks for that, Nettie. You know, my brother was a huge fan of Kirby Air Ride as well. I feel like I watched him do that one city level like a million times over. And Mario Kart is one of those must-play party games. I am terrible at it, but whenever folks play it at a get-together, I love gathering around, watching, and cheering folks on. It's one of those games that I think a lot of folks can play regardless of their skill level. So, great answer, Nettie. Next up from Slurm316 on YouTube, Slurm says, lovely to have the podcast back, Tina. In response to your question, I think one that sticks out to myself is the Uncharted franchise of games. My partner would watch me play, and she quickly got invested in these characters and the stories told in each game. She would join in and play parts of the game with myself, usually when I'm stuck at a section or a puzzle I've been banging my head against, but she would do it on the first try. We always look forward to the next installment in Nathan Drake's adventures, and each new game is met with the same enthusiasm as the last. And if I can give a second answer, it would be the Mario Kart franchise. We adore playing these co-op, either racing against each other in one-on-one or as a part of a GP series of races which includes CPU karts. The chaos which unfolds during a typical Mario Kart race between the items you pick up, your fellow kart drivers, and the courses themselves would always make each race exciting and always left us saying, just one more race. So, UN2 is a big fan of the Mario Kart franchise. I feel like the chaos and randomness of Mario Kart is a big part of the fun. It keeps things fresh so no two rounds are the same, and it helps level the playing field between experienced players and newbies. As for Uncharted, I think that's a great franchise to share with somebody. If I'm not mistaken, they're primarily single-player games, although I think later titles might have incorporated some co-op experiences. But still, there's a lot of fun to be had from sharing a single-player game with somebody else, as Ewan said, because you can pass the controller back and forth between you whenever you get stuck on certain parts. And those Uncharted games are very cinematic as well, so it's kind of like watching a movie together. Excellent suggestions here, Ewan. It sounds like you and your partner are having tons of fun. Just a Game Hero answered on Twitter, the most fun I have with video games is with my family. Just whatever game is out at the time. I did enjoy playing Smash Bros. With my brother. Great answer, Just a Game Hero. I too love sharing games with my family. I grew up playing a lot of games with my brother, but I also loved sharing things like Wii Fit with my parents. I remember my mom and dad would do their Wii Fit balance board training and their age testing every day for years, first thing in the morning. They would do it even before I woke up, and then they'd brag to me over breakfast that they had been told by the Wii that their fitness level was equal to an 18-year-old's. And it's good to hear that you liked playing Smash Bros. With your brother. That's another great party game. I love that multiple people can play it at a time, so no matter how many friends you have playing with you, everybody can jump in and have fun. So thank you for your answer. And finally, Chain Snake on Discord said, honestly, it's an ongoing one as of now, the Final Fantasy XIV streams. The story has become incredibly impactful to me over the course of playing it, and to be able to share this journey with you all has been such a joy and honor. It's always something I'm looking forward to each week, and even if nothing super exciting is happening that day, it's still a step down a path I've grown to hold dear alongside of people who are even more important to me. And that's something I wouldn't trade the most engaging gameplay in the world for. Great answer, Snake. I have to agree. I think Final Fantasy XIV is the most fun I've had playing games with other folks in a long time. I'm not much of a multiplayer person these days because I find it difficult to play a game with someone else on stream, talk to chat, and take in the story. It's a little too much for my brain, but for some reason, Final Fantasy XIV is different. I love having folks from my community jump into a dungeon with me, fight waves of monsters, and beat tough bosses together. And on top of that, like Snake said, we get to share the story with each other. Even if other players aren't in the cutscenes that I'm experiencing, we get to have a moment of watching it together on the stream and speculate what's going to happen next. And maybe the biggest and best shared experiences of Final Fantasy XIV for me is our community dress-up themes, where each week I challenge folks with a theme and they make a new outfit for their character based on that theme. I love seeing the community's creativity and celebrating their fashion. So Final Fantasy XIV is a wonderful game to share with others. Thank you so much for that, Snake. On to the review. I'd love to tell you about a charming visual novel that I played recently called Witchy Life Story by Sundew Studios. Thanks to the developers for the key to the game, which they had given me about a year or so ago. This summer, I was feeling a little low, a little torn about life. Sometimes I get into kind of a weird headspace where I think, am I doing enough? Should I be working harder? What should I change about myself to make life better? I get kind of existential sometimes, I guess, and I needed something light to distract me. Witchy Life Story was perfect for that, but also perfect for settling some of my inner worries. Witchy Life Story is a visual novel with potion making and gardening folded into it seamlessly. Your task as a fledgling witch from a very prominent family is to help the fine folks of Flora prepare for their harvest festival in 2 weeks' time. Your personal goal, however, is to get out of there as soon as possible. Your character is convinced that you are stationed in this backwoods town as punishment for your unruly behavior, and partially you are right about that. But as you get to know the folks of Flora and help them through their struggles, your character begins to genuinely connect with them and see the ways in which your magic can help them, and also where it doesn't suffice. Some problems, it turns out, are bigger than magic and require other techniques that non-magic users are better suited to. The magic crafting in Witchy Life Story is very charming. Please excuse the pun. You make oils, charms, incense, and potions for folks depending on what they need. A potion for protection, for example, has to be aligned with certain colors, celestial arrangements, and flower ingredients. But it's pretty much fail-proof. I don't even think you can mix a potion that has the wrong ingredients in it. The result is a delightfully colorful, magical creation tailor-made to solve a problem. Or, in most cases, during your first week, create a new one. Often our protagonist goes a bit too far, suffusing their creations with extra, unasked for magic to go above and beyond. So, for instance, a potion to help one connect with others for a social gathering gets infused with a rune that suddenly makes a quiet wallflower into a jabberjaw, which works great at a party, but then it puts the recipient in an odd position the next day when folks from the party come over to hang out. An introvert's nightmare. Speaking of introverts, the characters of Witchy Life Story are fleshed out, relatable, and likable. Each character plays a role in the festival and grapples with their own problems. Perfectionism, overworking, delegation, pushing through creative blocks, or taking on new responsibilities. Over the course of the game, you and the people of Flora learn to love and trust yourselves and each other a little more. Jacques, the baker, for instance, has to push past the one singular bad review he's ever gotten for his madeleines in order to bake with joy in his heart again. Part of his journey is learning to trust in his own abilities, and also listening to the love that comes to him daily from the visitors who come to his restaurant. His wife, Mel, on the other hand, is burning herself out every day, working non-stop on festival preparations, from minutia like napkin rings to bigger matters of who will perform and when. Also, raise your hand if this sounds like you. It's me for sure. Rather than delegate tasks to other people and take time for herself, she keeps taking on more and more work to free up other people's burdens. And then, of course, she gets sick. She has to learn her limits, say no to some things, and remember that she's valued and loved at her job, so people will want to help her with work so that it gets done to her satisfaction. There's also 3 romance options: Naisha, Jonas, and Devin. Naisha is an incredibly talented artist who is struggling with her muse. On the one hand, she's having a tough time creating a mural for the town festival that really captures the spirit of Flora. On the other hand, she's struggling with her imaginary friends, little magical spirits that only she can see that she's been friends with since she was a child, but whom she abandoned because she thought they were for children only. Now, they're tossing paint all over her studio and getting in her way. And even beyond that, she's struggling with the desire to come into her own, to be free and independent, which she's also concerned for her grandmother, Ruth, who is the very capable, yet maybe overly caring mayor of Flora. Jonas is another one of the romanceable options. He is a golden retriever personified. Fluffy, high energy, a little bit clumsy, but well intentioned. As the head of construction for the Harvest Festival, it's Jonas's first time in a leadership role, and he's had some struggles communicating in the past that led to an embarrassing meltdown. He wants to overcome these struggles and be the man that his sister, Mel, and her husband, Jacques, believe him to be, but it's not that easy for him to open up. Finally, there's Devin, who is Flora's most talented musician. They have a passion for music that comes from the soul, but they have troubles making friends and socializing. They're more of a wallflower than a rock star, but for the festival, they've been tasked with creating an anthem to perform on the main stage. They need a lot of help working through barriers like performance anxiety and creative blocks, but thankfully they've at least got one good friend in Naisha to help cheer them up. And let's say you fall in love with all 3 candidates. Luckily, there's no penalty for romancing everyone, nor is there a penalty for romancing no one. I picked romance options for my dialogue almost every time, though occasionally I picked a non-romance option to see the results. If you select a dialogue option that's romantic, your character gets a little blushy and they say something sweet, and the recipient takes it well and they reciprocate. And if you select a friendly message instead, they don't lose love points or whatever, nor do they get disappointed with you that you didn't flirt with them. They're just happy to be your friend and receive your advice and assistance. And as for the end of the game, when you have the choice to attend the Flora Harvest Festival, you're allowed to pick a romance option to go with, or you can decide to go with a friend instead. I'm also happy to say that the other folks that you romance throughout the game don't show up to the festival with their arms crossed and their hearts broken, ready to rat you out for flirting with them. I took a few things away from Witchy Life's story. First, it's just plain fun. It's a good narrative, and I enjoyed the magical crafting and gardening experiences because 1, of course, I'm a gardener, and 2, I used to be into witchy stuff when I was a kid. But I also took away some of the valuable lessons about mindfulness. After the first half of the game, the characters confront you. You've been helping them for about a week and you're ready to leave, hoping that this midnight ritual you've concocted will solve everything. But your undue haste brings everything to light. How you've been adding extra stuff to their crafts just to get out of there quicker, and also the truth of your past mistakes. But rather than exile you from town, the people of the village look within. They ask, why would you have added extra magic to what they ask for? And realize it's because they're asking too much of you. And when it comes to the past, everyone's grappling with the past of their own. From that night forward, their focus and yours as their friend and the town witch is to be more mindful. Rather than solve everything with magic, you help them through thought exercises to envision their days, rather than overplan and fill them with too many tasks. You help them with deep breathing techniques so they can clear their mind before they present their ideas to each other. And you help them with affirmations so that they can recognize that they truly are worth loving, so they shouldn't give up on themselves. I found myself practicing these techniques alongside the characters and applying them throughout the weeks that followed playing the game. I still do some of these techniques to this day to help me through tough times, and I have to say, it feels like magic. And I also took away from the game the lesson that you've got to help yourself before you help someone else. The people of Flora are working so hard to make the Harvest Festival perfect that they end up hurting themselves and each other. They get sick, sad, lonely, angry, frustrated, and burnt out. They forget that if they're not kind to themselves, they won't have what it takes to do what they want to do and to do it lovingly. But in the end, through your character's help with magic and mindfulness, they remember to accept and heal themselves so that they can help each other. And so the festival is a huge success. And though your character has to leave town, you promise to come back once your magical training is finished so you can spend more time with the town and the people you grew to love. Witchy Life Story is a nice bite-sized experience that feels perfect for the fall season. If you want something cozy to retreat into and you want to learn some great techniques for grounding yourself, please give it a look. I think you'll find that it works like magic. You know, my older brother's been doing this challenge lately where he's looked up some of the lowest rated RPGs and played them to see if there was any redeeming qualities to them. There have been quite a few he struggled with, but most of them have their own charms, like their stories or their soundtracks that he's been enjoying. That got me thinking, what's the oldest game you've enjoyed playing? Have you revisited it lately? What makes it great, and what makes it retro or of its own era? If you'd like to respond, you have a few options. You can respond to the tweet that I'm going to tweet out, or you can tweet directly at Games in the Glade on Twitter using the GITGasks hashtag. Or if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can just leave a comment below the video. That's all I have for you today. There will be more news and reviews some other time, so keep an eye out for updates in your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube, and follow the show's Twitter account at Games in the Glade for more. This podcast is supported by the Friends of the Forest on Patreon, the link for which I will leave in the description. Playthroughs of Witchy Life Story and Dordogne are out now on Patreon, so I'll be deciding soon on the next playthrough. Thanks to Puddles of Infinity for the use of their song Porches and Universes, and thank you to Titsay for the beautiful album art. And even though our time together is coming to an end, you can always find your way back here, my world-worn weary friend. There's a spot here in the clearing, in the quietude and shade, for you to relax a while and listen to Games in the Glade.